So, hi everybody, my name is Suzie Millar, as you know, and I co-founded the Scottish Bee Company with my husband in 2017. Thank you all so much for having me along. It's an absolute privilege to chat to you creative bunch. And as you know, I'm going to talk today about the concept of organised chaos and also about how nature reflects me and my business. I thought I'd just give you a little bit of a background about the business first of all. So our aim with the business is to create a profits for purpose business. We really love the idea that you can do good things for people and the wider world, but still make a profit. And we really don't think that the two are mutually exclusive. What we do is we give hives and bees to bee farmers across Scotland, and then we sell their honey on their behalf. We find though that although we were trying to be a private company and do good things, people generally just did not understand what that was. So in order to be able to make it more understandable, because we weren't a social enterprise and we weren't a charity, we decided to set up our charity, Repollinate, which does all the things that we were already doing as a business, like giving out wildflower seeds, starting apprenticeships, doing research, giving hives to bee farmers. But now we have a charity that does all of that. And what the business does is it just donates money from each jar sold to Repollinate. So my sister-in-law has always described me as the most disorganized, organized person that she knows. I think that's because I appear to achieve lots of things, but with absolutely no specific plan in place and no visible structure. At least that's what people see. In fact, I have a world of plans in my head and in the notes on my phone and on bank statements and on a blackboard that I painted on the back of my door. I find the concept of organisation and the positive feelings associated with it really interesting. Organisation is the way that businesses are run. It's important that we have organisation, and people encourage it through the entire working world. But chaos people really don't like, and they try really hard to move away from it. But when we look at these two images, this one on the left is clearly organised, but this one here is what would happen if we let this one just become free and grow wild. It looks a little bit more chaotic, but it also is a place that encourages all types of pollinators and other animals to thrive, and thereby increases our ability to grow vegetables and fruit that we eat. If all wildlife was organised, there would be reduced growth. I find people get frustrated with chaos, me included. So it's interesting that others can see me as chaotic, as I generally feel quite organised. So is one person's organised just another's chaos? I fell in love with bees because they are so chaotic on the outside. They whirl around and they buzz past your ear. And even within the hive, they look like they have absolutely no idea where they're going. But the reality is that they're super organised. And I've got some pretty bee pictures for you. So this is what the bees do. We give them a frame of wax, and it's just a thin sheet of wax, and then they take that wax and they build it out into that hexagonal structure that you see that is entirely symmetrical and extremely well organized. And of course, when you look at this, you think that they are really organized. But then if we look at this video here, like really, it's chaotic. They're flying into the hive, they're bashing into the hive as they land. And then if you're in the middle of it, it just feels like a world of chaos. And then when they come back into the hive again, all you see is that organized structure. However, it's a man-made hive, so perhaps they look organized because we've given them the structure in the first place. When we look at this one, this is a swarm that my apprentice found a couple of years ago, and it doesn't look organised in any way, shape or form. What is organised about bees and what I love about them is that they all have their individual roles and they can achieve a lot within a day. The queen bee, for example, can lay up to 2,000 eggs in 24 hours. So despite them looking and feeling chaotic, they are thought to be some of the most organised animals in nature. I started the Scottish Bee Company after being a chiropractor for 8 years. While I loved seeing and chatting to patients and also learning, I really didn't enjoy the restrictions that were in place and also the solitude of day-to-day practice. I knew quite early on that it wouldn't work for me and I experienced trauma during practice, but I persevered as I was worried that I just wanted to give up because I was really scared. It took me years not to be scared as a chiropractor. And then when I wasn't scared anymore and I still didn't enjoy it, I chatted to my friend about giving it up. And she said, in nature, things are just allowed to die. They're supposed to die as that goes around into the creation of new things, like autumn leaves turning into mulch on the ground and making way for new shoots. Of course, this resonated with me because I love nature, or maybe I was just grateful for the excuse, but whatever. I gave it all up in the midst of having my first child and started Scottish Bee Company, and I've honestly never looked back. Overall, the journey that we've been on in our startup world is akin to the bee flight path, which you can see on the left. It is in no way linear, and it has also been extremely like the Coolin Ridge in Skye. It's been way harder than I ever thought it could be. I was incredibly naive. We started trading when I was pregnant with my wee boy, and we had to rely on handouts from family, and we accumulated a lot of personal debt just to get through it all. Very fortunately, my uncle had a small syndicate of investors and they helped us get started with everything, and they invested in the company. Ian, my husband, was working on the business full time and me part time. In the beginning, we had everything going in and out of the flat. We bought hives to give to the bee farmers, like I said before, and that allowed them to get into business, but it also allowed us to have a supply chain because we weren't bee farmers ourselves. But then once the honey was jarred up, it meant that it came to our flat and we posted it out to customers. It was a really rocky time as we had absolutely no idea about how to sell things, but we also had no idea about how to order things. We ordered way too many packaging tubes and completely underestimated the amount that would be delivered, thinking foolishly that it would fit into our flat. The Arctic lorry arrived at our front door and we had no forklift and nowhere to put it, and it was forecasted to rain. Thank you, nature. So our elderly neighbour helped us carry it off the lorry and put it into various cupboards throughout the block of flats, much to my neighbour's disgust. Here is a photograph of my lounge, and probably when you're looking at it, you can look at all the bags and postal bags and think, oh wow, they had loads of orders, but actually the postal bags are filled with all the excess tubes that we couldn't fit into the rest of the block of flat cupboards. I remember one evening having a board meeting with my uncle and one of our investors in my living room with my son in a sling, but he wouldn't stop crying, so I had to walk him up and down screaming, and me nearly screaming while we did this board meeting. He had reflux and he didn't sleep for anything longer than 40 minutes day and night, and that went on for about 18 months. I cried pretty much all the time. Ian went back to work in August 2018 doing what he'd done before, and at that point I became full-time. At which point, tragically, my uncle and auntie, who were intrinsic to the business, went missing and were found a week later murdered. I only mention this because I think it shows that you really can't prepare for everything, and sometimes nature just throws you a tsunami. And when your worst fears come true, all that can be done is to sit back and grieve while slowly trying to regroup and carry on. I asked my apprentice if this happens in the bee world, and she said, when the queen bee dies, the bees also slow down. They panic, they run around, and they try to make new queen cells, and this delays their productivity for a couple of months, which in our world would be the equivalent of several months. Although randomly during that time, we still managed to somehow build a customer base. As a breather, I thought it might be quite nice to look at an image of a queen bee. So most people don't really know what the queen bee looks like, and probably assume that she looks completely different from everyone else, but she doesn't. She's this one here. She looks really similar to the others. It's just that she's slightly bigger. So after the trauma of all that, we were faced with another issue. As a startup, predictably, we needed investment to be able to achieve what we wanted to achieve. Our customer base was growing and we knew it could be successful, but we really needed financial support. Ian thought the best way to get through it would be to reach out to other angel investors. So I went to meet with the gatekeeper of a well-known Edinburgh investment group who was absolutely lovely, but he asked me what my gross profit was, and I just was like, gross profit, I have no idea. I have no idea what that is. So I realized that I had some learning to do. So I spent most evenings in between a crying awake child learning how to code Excel spreadsheets to make a proper set of accounts. I came across Green Angel Syndicate in the summer of last year, and after 6 months of chatting things through, they invested in us at the end of January this year. So things were looking really, really good. Hello, global pandemic. Aside from the fact that 75% of our retailers shut down, the thing that we have found the most difficult is communication. Of course, we've had Zoom to increase the amount of time that we're able to chat to each other, but facial expression and body language are difficult to communicate on that. So we've really found ourselves in situations where we just haven't been able to communicate what we thought we had, and we're sure that we would have been able to if we weren't in lockdown. Bees have a brilliant way of communicating, which I thought you'd like to see. So it's called the Waggle Dance. And this little dude here is doing it. You follow him around. There you go. So basically what they do is that they appear to sort of dance around, and each move that they make is their way of feeding back information to the hive. So as they circle one way, it means there's nectar that direction. Circle the other way, it means there's nectar in another direction. And it's a really, really interesting way for all the bees to learn, where they can go out and find pollen in the outer world. It's quite cool. Yeah, perhaps if we could all do a waggle dance and shake it all about on Zoom, then Zoom calls would be way more interesting than just being able to talk. Having said that, though, we have really adapted to the crisis and we're still showing growth. We've found new avenues for distribution, mainly online. But one thing that has come out of COVID and also our investment is the ability to take on more staff and really develop an infrastructure that works. We've needed to create properly defined roles and tasks because we don't have the option of chatting in an office, and arranging a Zoom call every 5 minutes really doesn't work. I've realised that it's important to have a symbiotic working environment, to have a slow down and a speed up person. I think it's clear from this talk that I'm the speed up person, but my husband and now frustratingly my chief operating officer are both slow down people, and I find them infuriating, but I can only imagine how they feel about me. I want to just get on with things while they want to write things up and use words like processes. This is a thing called Trophylaxis. So it's basically where two bees participate in this, and what they also call it food sharing. And what they do is one bee brings nectar back into the hive, and then it shares it around with other bees to break down the enzymes and then turn it into honey. But it also allows the bees to learn about where the nectar has been brought in. And we've tried to emulate that within our business by collaborating with other companies and bee farmers as much as possible. We've had to work to get people to trust us, but we already have 5 bee farmers that we collaborate with, and we hope to have more. We also have used this idea as a way to encourage our staff to share ideas and hope that everyone will learn from each other as we progress. So back to organised chaos. We started talking about organised chaos recently as we began to give some finesse to our branding. We had to swap over websites from WooCommerce to Shopify, and we had a new website designed. But when I looked at the design, I was really disappointed, as it seemed to have completely lost its soul. It was now completely organised and structured, and it worked well, and the search engine optimization and the back end was functioning for the first time in ages, but the feel of it was really clinical. And I realised that was because we hadn't really communicated what we wanted. We'd said that we needed it to be more organised, and that's exactly what the developers had done. I then realised that I hadn't communicated it because I hadn't actually realised that that's what I wanted. It had taken the creation of something organised for me to realise that what I wanted was free-flowing. So I spoke with our brand developer, and I said to her that I felt our company was like nature. The organised, methodical part of us is very much the bees within the hive. But then there's this other layer of freedom and creativity, and that's the free-flowing wild aspect of nature. Since then, I've accepted that both organisation and chaos are part of me, and that feeds down into the business, and both are brilliant and both are incredibly frustrating. Startup life has been exhausting, challenging, but as with all hikes up a hill with multiple false summits, you end up realising that the journey did have fun bits and that overcoming the challenges was insanely rewarding. I still cannot quite get to grips with this mantra of going with the flow in terms of life. To me, it's much more like this, but look at them, they're having way more fun. Thank you.